Handcuffs, public shame, and his little girl crying. This is what Dominic Cole faces just because of his skin color. Head flight attendant Chloe Bennett stands at seat 1F, rudely demanding his ID to prove he belongs in first class on Flight 1409 to Miami. Dominic is only here to take his daughter on vacation and check the service quality of the airline he owns. Conflict explodes when bossy workers ruin a high-class flight with their unfair bias. Will this father let them hurt his pride, or will he turn the tables and shock everyone? However, before the storm of shame hit them at seat 1F, the morning had started like any other quiet Tuesday. It was 9:17 in the morning at Terminal 3, Chicago O'Hare Airport. Announcements echoed through the tall glass ceiling, bouncing between rows of steel and light. Travelers rushed past in every direction, dragging bags, sipping coffee, chasing gates. Dominic Cole walked through the crowd in a plain gray sweater. It cost $321, but nobody could tell. His daughter, Tiana, held his hand tight. She was 5 years old. In her other arm, she hugged a worn teddy bear named Barnaby. One of its ears was almost torn off. The airport smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. Rolling suitcase wheels rattled across the tile in a steady rhythm. Somewhere above, a speaker crackled, with a boarding call nobody could quite understand. Dominic looked like any tired father on a trip. Nobody here knew the truth. He was the chairman of the board of Aero USA, the airline that owned this very plane. Today, he was not a boss. He was just a dad taking his little girl to Miami. He kept his sunglasses folded in his shirt pocket. He wore no rings, no chains, nothing flashy at all. His shoes were simple canvas sneakers, a little scuffed at the toes. Anyone walking past would see only a father managing a bag, a boarding pass, and a sleepy little girl. Tiana yawned wide beside him, rubbing one eye with the back of her hand. She had woken up too early, excited about the plane. She asked her father 3 times already if they would see dolphins in Miami. Maybe, Dominic told her, smiling down at her small, hopeful face. We'll have to look really close. She grinned and hugged Barnaby tighter, satisfied with that answer for now. He carried a quiet secret reason, too. He wanted to see how his own airline treated regular people. So he booked the tickets under a small side account. The balance on that card read $4,217.83. Nothing about it looked important. Nothing about it screamed money or power. He had built Aero USA from nothing, starting with 2 small planes and a stubborn dream. He never forgot what it felt like to be overlooked, to be judged before anyone even learned his name. That memory was exactly why this quiet test mattered so much to him now. At the check-in counter, a young worker named Marcus Vance helped them. Marcus was 28 years old. His uniform sleeve was a little frayed at the elbow. He smiled at Tiana with warm, tired eyes. The counter buzzed, with a low hum of printers spitting out luggage tags. Marcus typed quickly, his fingers tapping the keyboard in short, practiced bursts. He glanced up twice, checking that Tiana was comfortable, not just checking her bag. "First time flying to Miami?" Marcus asked, kneeling slightly to Tiana's height. She nodded shyly, hiding half her face behind Barnaby. Marcus laughed softly and slid a small paper airplane sticker across the counter for her to keep. Tiana dropped Barnaby on the dirty floor. Marcus bent down fast. He wiped the bear clean with his sleeve. He handed it back gently. "Here you go, little princess," he said. "Have a wonderful flight." Dominic watched this small moment closely. He said nothing, but he remembered it. A man's true character shows in the smallest actions, not the loudest words. He made a quiet note in his mind, the kind he never wrote down. Names like Marcus mattered more than titles ever could. They walked toward the gate together, father and daughter, hand in hand. Tiana hummed a small tune, swinging Barnaby by one paw. Overhead screens flickered with flight numbers and gate changes, a wall of quiet noise most people ignored. The real test was still waiting ahead of them. Would the warm kindness at the counter follow them in a first class? Or would something colder be waiting behind that curtain? By 10:20 that morning, Flight 1409 was closing its doors. Dominic and Tiana stepped through the jet bridge into the wide first-class cabin of the Boeing 777. Soft lavender oil drifted through the air. But something else hung there too, something colder. The cabin lights glowed a soft gold. Leather seats gleamed under that light, wide and spotless. Somewhere near the galley, ice clinked softly inside a silver bucket. A faint hum of quiet jazz played from hidden speakers overhead, meant to soothe, not to warn of what waited ahead. Rows of wealthy passengers turned their heads. Their eyes moved slowly over Dominic's plain sweater, then over Tiana's scuffed little sneakers. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband, whispering behind a raised hand. One man in seat 2B kept glancing at his gold watch. His name was Richard Vance, a stockbroker with an impatient jaw and a tight mouth. He had already complained twice about the boarding speed, loud enough for the whole row to hear. At the front of the cabin stood Chloe Bennett, the lead flight attendant. She was 24, with golden curled hair and sharp green eyes. She had just handed a warm towel to another guest, smiling wide. The moment she saw Dominic and Tiana, that smile vanished like a light switching off. Chloe stepped into the aisle, blocking their path. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice flat and cold. "Economy is at the back. This aisle isn't for you." Tiana's small fingers tightened around her father's hand. Her breathing caught in her throat. Dominic felt heat rise slowly up the back of his neck. His jaw flexed once beneath his skin, but his face stayed calm and still. Behind them, a line of passengers began to form, waiting to pass. Someone cleared their throat, impatient. Chloe did not move an inch to let them through. What would this quiet father do next, standing in front of his frightened little girl? Dominic did not raise his voice. He thought of Tiana first, always first. He would not scare her with anger. Instead, he wanted to give this young worker one honest chance to fix her mistake. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the printed boarding passes. He pointed calmly at the seat numbers. "We have valid tickets," he said, his tone even and quiet. "This is our seat, 1F and 1D. Chloe barely glanced at the papers. Her eyes swept over his plain sweater instead. No logo, no shine, nothing that screamed money to her. She smirked just slightly at the corner of her mouth. "Anyone can print a boarding pass," she said, tapping one manicured nail against the paper. "That doesn't prove anything to me. Our system sometimes mixes up seats," she said. "Sometimes people buy economy and try to sneak up here." She tilted her chin up. "This ticket is worth $1,200. I need proof you can actually afford it." She asked for his ID. She asked for the credit card used to buy the seats. Her tone stayed sweet on the surface, sharp underneath, like sugar poured over glass. Around them, passengers began to whisper. A few phones quietly lifted, ready to record. Richard Vance, in seat 2B, let out a short, mocking laugh and shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few nearby passengers chuckled quietly, agreeing without saying a word. One woman shook her head slowly, as if she had seen this exact scene play out before, somewhere else, some other day. Was this the moment a patient father's calm would finally break in front of his own child? Beside him, Tiana tugged softly at his sweater sleeve. Her eyes filled with tears that had not yet fallen. "Daddy," she whispered, "is it because our skin is darker? Maybe we should just sit in the back." Her words hit Dominic harder than any insult from Chloe ever could. For one long second, he could not breathe normally. His jaw tightened. A vein pulsed once at his temple, then stilled. He thought of his father, a hard-working mechanic, who never once bowed his head to anyone. He could almost smell the old garage again, motor oil and metal shavings, and hear the clang of a wrench dropped on concrete. His father used to say something Dominic never forgot. Never let another person make you feel small in a place you worked hard to earn. That memory settled the storm behind his ribs. His shoulders dropped an inch. His breathing slowed. Dominic knelt down slightly to meet his daughter's eyes. He kept his voice gentle and steady. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "We are in this seat, and we are not moving." He understood something important in that moment. If he backed down now, Tiana would carry this fear for years. She would grow up believing she always had to shrink herself for other people's comfort. He would not let that happen. Not today, not ever. He thought of every board meeting, every hard negotiation, every late night spent building this company, from 2 small planes into an empire. None of it meant anything if he could not protect one small girl's sense of worth on an ordinary Tuesday morning. What would happen when this father chose to stand tall instead of quietly walking away? At 10:35, Dominic gently guided Tiana into seat 1F. He buckled her seatbelt with careful, steady hands. The leather still held a faint smell of polish, cool under his palm. Then he sat down beside her in 1D, his shoulders relaxed but firm. He lifted his eyes and looked straight at Chloe. His voice stayed calm, but every word landed with quiet weight. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I paid for these 2 seats. I expect you to do your job." Around them, the massive engines outside began to hum louder, a low, steady growl through the floor. The plane rolled slowly toward the runway, tilting gently with each turn. Overhead bins clicked shut, one by one, down the long cabin aisle. There was no turning back now, not for Dominic and not for Chloe either. Both of them had crossed a line neither could easily uncross. The Cold War between them had just become something much bigger, something the whole cabin could feel in the air. Chloe's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. She grabbed a small radio clipped to her collar. She pressed the button and spoke fast, her voice sharp and dishonest. "I have a passenger causing a disturbance in first class," she said. "Possible security concern." From seat 2B, Richard Vance leaned forward, sneering. "Yes, remove him," he snapped. "I have $1 million meeting. I won't let people like this delay my flight." Somewhere behind the galley curtain, a coffee machine hissed and gurgled, oblivious to the tension in the cabin. A child, too, rose back, began to cry softly, sensing the mood, without understanding it. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper just enough to watch, curious but silent. But not everyone on that plane shared Richard's cruelty. A young trainee flight attendant named Sarah Jenkins stepped closer. She was only 22, 3 weeks into the job, her hands trembling slightly. She noticed something small, but important, a corner of a metal VIP card peeking from Dominic's worn leather wallet. The metal caught the cabin light for just a second, a dull silver flash. It looked heavier than any card she had ever seen a regular passenger carry. Sarah had grown up watching her own mother work double shifts at a diner, treated poorly by customers who judged her by her uniform. She knew what quiet dignity looked like, and she recognized it now in the man sitting in 1D. She leaned toward Chloe and whispered, "We should double-check the VIP passenger list. His card looks quiet." Chloe snapped, cutting her off. "Get back to work. Useless trainee." Sarah's cheeks burned. She stepped back, eyes down, but she did not forget what she had seen. She glanced once more at Dominic, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Meanwhile, Chloe refused to bring Tiana any water, even as the little girl coughed softly from thirst. She walked past their row twice, her heels clicking sharp against the floor, without once turning her head. Dominic reached into his own bag instead. He handed his daughter a small bottle of water without a word. Tiana drank slowly, her small hands wrapped tight around the bottle. His eyes flicked down to his wrist. His Audemars Piguet watch read exactly 10:42. The second hand ticked forward, steady, unbothered by any of it. Somewhere above them, heavier footsteps were already approaching. What kind of man was about to walk through that curtain next? At 10:44, heavy footsteps echoed down the aisle. Captain Bradley Hayes stepped into the cabin. He was 51 years old, a veteran pilot, with decades of flying behind him. But pride sat on his shoulders like armor. He stopped in front of Dominic. He did not ask for identification. He did not ask a single question. He simply crossed his arms, standing shoulder to shoulder with Chloe. His uniform jacket was crisp, lined with gold stripes on each shoulder. He wore it like armor, like proof that his word could never be questioned. "Mr. Cole," Hayes said, his voice booming through the quiet cabin. "I'm Captain Bradley Hayes. I have full authority to refuse transport to anyone threatening flight safety." He leaned in closer, his tone hard as steel. "You are harassing my crew. Take your daughter and leave this aircraft now, or airport police will remove you in handcuffs." Chloe stood just behind him, arms still crossed, chin lifted with satisfaction. Nearby passengers had gone completely still, forks paused halfway to plates of untouched breakfast. Tiana let out a small, frightened whimper. She buried her face against her father's arm, her small shoulders shaking. The whole cabin fell into a tense, heavy silence. Even the soft hiss of the air vents seemed to grow louder in that stillness. Somewhere a seatbelt buckle clicked, tiny and sharp like a gunshot in the quiet. How could one quiet father possibly stand against the captain's total power over this plane? The intercom clicked once overhead, then went silent again, as if the plane itself was holding its breath along with everyone inside it. At 10:47 exactly, 2 airport police officers appeared at the cabin door. Metal handcuffs glinted at one officer's belt, catching the light in a cold flash. Tiana burst into tears, clutching Barnaby against her chest, with both small arms, her sobs echoing through the silent cabin. Chloe's lips curled into a satisfied smile. She was ready to watch this humiliation unfold in front of everyone. She smoothed her uniform jacket, almost proud. But Dominic did not move. His hand stayed steady in his lap. Slowly, calmly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black satellite phone, the kind only top executives carried. He dialed a private number. Within seconds, he was speaking directly to O'Hare's air traffic control tower. "This is Dominic Cole," he said, his voice low but unshakable. "Ground flight 1409 immediately. Hold this aircraft on the tarmac. I am in seat 1D. His voice did not shake. It did not rise. It simply carried, calm and absolute, the way a closing door sounds final without needing to slam. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The 2 officers exchanged a confused glance, hands hovering near their radios. Then, without warning, the massive engines outside suddenly powered down to silence. The steady hum that had filled the cabin all morning simply vanished. The cabin lights flickered into emergency mode, casting a pale amber glow over every stunned face. What kind of ordinary passenger had the power to stop an entire airplane with one single phone call? Captain Hayes's radio crackled violently in his hand. A furious voice shouted through the static. "Hayes, stop that aircraft right now. You just insulted the chairman of the board. Return to gate 14A immediately." Hayes's face drained of all color in an instant, pale as old paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand, still gripping the radio, began to shake. Dominic calmly opened his worn leather wallet. He placed a titanium identification card on the small tray table. Gold letters gleamed under the cabin lights. Chairman of the board, Aero USA. At the same moment, he turned his phone screen outward. A live video call showed CEO Gregory Montgomery and 12 board members, all watching in stunned silence from an emergency meeting. Their faces filled the small screen, frozen in shock. Gregory Montgomery leaned toward his camera, his voice tight with disbelief. "Dominic, are you and Tiana both safe? Tell us exactly what you need." "We're safe," Dominic answered evenly. "But I need this documented. Every word, every decision made here today." One board member scribbled fast notes, her pen scratching against paper loud enough to hear through the small speaker. Chloe's knees went weak beneath her. She grabbed the edge of a seat to stay standing. The blood seemed to drain straight out of her face, leaving her lips pale and trembling. How far would these 2 proud workers fall now that the truth stood fully exposed? Captain Hayes dropped to one knee beside Dominic's seat, his composure completely shattered. His voice cracked and trembled barely above a whisper. "Mr. Cole," he begged, "I was only following my crew's report. I've given 25 years to this airline. Please, I beg you." Dominic looked at him for a long moment, silent. He said nothing back. The silence stretched longer than any answer could have, heavier than shouting would ever be. Chloe stood frozen in the aisle. Her golden curls trembled slightly with each shaking breath. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, dripping onto her crisp uniform collar. In 5 short minutes, her own arrogance had destroyed everything she had built. Dominic turned away from both of them. He wrapped his arms gently around Tiana instead. He wiped her tears away with his thumb, his voice soft and warm. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "Justice always finds its way." But outside their small bubble, other passengers had begun grumbling loudly about the long delay. Someone near the back groaned about missing a connecting flight. A businessman checked his watch again and again, sighing hard through his nose. A woman muttered to her husband that she just wanted to reach her sister's wedding on time. Dominic understood the deeper challenge now. He had to punish real wrongdoing. Yet he also had to protect his airline's public trust and reputation and calm 200 restless passengers at the same time. A flight attendant hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Dominic caught her eye and gave a small, reassuring nod. Whatever came next, he would handle it calmly, the way he handled everything that truly mattered. How could one man fix a broken system without breaking the whole flight apart? Dominic stood up slowly and picked up the cabin intercom handset. It felt cool and heavy in his hand. His voice carried clearly through every speaker on the plane. "To all passengers on Flight 1409, he said, I am Dominic Cole, chairman of Air USA. I sincerely apologize for this delay, but this airline will never fly while allowing discrimination on board." He paused for a breath, letting the words settle over the cabin. Every eye in first class stayed fixed on him, waiting. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Several passengers slowly lowered their phones. Richard Vance sank low in his seat, suddenly very interested in his own shoes. Dominic did not hesitate. He fired Captain Hayes on the spot for serious misconduct and abuse of power. He revoked Chloe Bennett's flying license immediately with 0 severance pay. He suspended the entire crew pending a full federal investigation into workplace discrimination. A flight attendant near the galley pressed a hand over her mouth, stunned. Nobody in that cabin had ever seen a decision made so fast or so final. Then his tones softened with real warmth. He called Marcus Vance up to the cabin, the same kind worker from the check-in counter that morning. He promoted Marcus on the spot to Director of Customer Experience. He gave him full authority to organize a brand new crew within 20 minutes. Marcus blinked, stunned, his hands still holding a stack of paperwork he no longer needed. "Sir, I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say yes," Dominic replied simply, "and get to work." He turned next to young Sarah Jenkins, the only trainee who had tried to speak up earlier. He promoted her immediately to lead flight attendant for this very flight. Sarah's eyes went wide, then filled with grateful tears. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering a quiet thank you no one but Dominic heard. Slowly, one passenger began to clap. Then another joined in. Within seconds, the entire cabin erupted into loud, grateful applause, filling the space that silence had held only minutes before. What would this new kinder crew bring to the rest of their journey to Miami? By 11:30 that morning, Flight 1409 finally lifted off into a clear blue sky, heading towards sunny Miami. The engines roared back to life, steady and sure, pressing everyone gently back into their seats. A soft chime rang overhead as the seatbelt sign switched off. Passengers exhaled together, a slow release of tension that had built for nearly an hour. Inside the cabin, Tiana sipped apple juice from a cup handed to her by Sarah Jenkins, her new favorite flight attendant. She hugged Barnaby tightly against her chest, finally smiling again. Her small giggle floated through the cabin, light as the clouds outside. Marcus Vance walked by in a crisp new suit, a little too big in the shoulders, borrowed in a hurry. He bowed his head respectfully toward Dominic. "Thank you for trusting me," Marcus said quietly. "For showing me kindness still matters." Dominic shook his hand firmly. "You earned this," he said. "Every bit of it, starting today." Dominic looked out the small, oval window. 35,000 feet below, the clouds stretched out like soft, white cotton fields. Sunlight caught the wingtip in a bright, steady gleam. He had done more than protect his daughter's smile today. He had planted a seed that would grow far beyond this single flight. Not long after, Aero USA launched a new company-wide training program. They called it the Tiana Grace Standard. $5 million each year would fund lessons in empathy and fairness for every single employee. New hires learned it in their first week. Veteran staff learned it too, no exceptions. Even senior pilots sat through the same classroom sessions as new trainees, no titles allowed to skip the lesson. Marcus Vance rose through the company over the following years, eventually leading the entire customer experience division nationwide. He never forgot the frayed sleeve he once wore, and he made sure every new hire heard his story. Sarah Jenkins became one of the most requested flight attendants in Aero USA's history, known for her warmth and her sharp, honest eyes. Passengers often asked for her by name, remembering the young woman who once dared to speak up when it mattered most. Richard Vance, the stockbroker from Seat 2B, quietly canceled his Aero USA account within a month. He never spoke of that flight again. Colleagues noticed he grew a little quieter, after it, a little less quick to sneer at strangers. Years later, people still remembered what happened on Flight 1409, that ordinary Tuesday morning. A quiet, humble father, dismissed at first glance, turned out to hold more power than anyone in that cabin ever imagined. Dignity, it turned out, could never be measured by the price of a ticket. True strength was never about showing off wealth or status. It was about lifting others gently, especially when no one else was watching. Tiana grew older, and the memory softened into something warm instead of painful. She would tell the story herself one day of the morning her father stood tall for her, without ever raising his voice. She would remember the shame first, sharp and sudden, and then the calm that followed it, steady as her father's hand in hers. She would remember Barnaby, still a little torn at the ear, tucked safely under her arm the whole way to Miami. And she would remember, most of all, that her father never once needed to shout to be heard. Somewhere over the Florida coastline, the plane began its slow descent. Sunlight spread wide, and gold across the water below, calm as a held breath finally released. The seatbelt sign chimed softly overhead. Tiana pressed her small palm against the window, watching the coastline grow closer, tiny boats scattered like white specks on blue glass. Dominic reached over and gently squeezed her shoulder. She looked up at him and smiled, the fear from that morning already fading into something smaller, something manageable. On that one bright morning, high above the clouds, a father proved that truth to his little girl. He proved it to the whole world watching below.